This is Rhett Read Podcast.
We take a deep dive into the Fear Street series
And review other books we've read.
I'm Serge.
And I'm Anna.
We're happy you can join us.
Hey there, Rhett Readers.
Welcome back to another episode of Red Read Podcast. Today we're going to be reviewing A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab.
We actually listened to this book on audiobook. It's the first book in the Shades of Magic trilogy.
I heard about this book on BookTube. We were watching a lot of different videos, and a lot of the BookTube people had this book on their shelves. I think we were watching like people's bookshelf tours.
It was a combination of bookshelf tours and end-of-the-year books.
Yeah, and everybody had this book on their shelf. And I thought to myself, well, that's interesting. Not only did they all have it, they all seem to really like it. Might as well give it a listen.
So it's the first book in the trilogy. It takes place in the 1800s.
Yeah, like the early 1800s, like 1820, something like that. And it's set in London. But the one interesting thing about London is that we find there are actually 4 different Londons that are in 4 alternate dimensions. However, there are some people who can actually travel between all the different dimensions. The one interesting thing about London in this world is that in all 4 dimensions, London is called London. London is located in the same place. And even though the English language doesn't necessarily exist in all these places, for some reason, the royal families that reside in London can all speak English. Our London is called Grey London, and it doesn't have any magic, and it's kind of boring.
There's White London, which is full of magic. The world there is basically run with magic.
It's run with magic, but magic is a scarce resource. And so everybody's fighting each other for every little scrap of magic that they can get. And it's a very cutthroat world.
And then you have Red London, which is sort of a happy medium between Grey London and White London. There is magic, but it's not cutthroat.
Well, there is magic, and the magic is plentiful, and the way people approach magic is different. Whereas White Londoners seek to control and dominate the forces of magic, Red Londoners take kind of like a
Yu-Gi-Oh approach?
Yeah, kind of like an Eastern philosophy, metaphysical, kind of be in balance with the forces of magic and like channel them through you, but
the heart of the cards.
Yeah, whatever.
And then there's Black London.
Right, Black London was actually sealed off, this catastrophic event that happened a few hundred years ago. And at that time, not only was Black London sealed off, but travel between all the worlds was forbidden except for a select few people.
The select few people are called Antarai.
Humans can sometimes be born with this ability. It doesn't really run in families. It's random. And what happens is you're born with like one completely black eye. And you possess a different kind of magic that is not the same as the magic in Red London or the magic in White London. It's called blood magic. And you have to cut yourself and then say some magic spell, which is completely different from how magic works if you're just a regular human. And Kel, the main character, is an Antarai, and he can travel between all these worlds.
He was adopted by the royal family of Red London. They raised him like a son, but they also use him to send messages to the other Londons that are available.
Kel seems like a pretty ordinary guy, but actually he's got a secret. He has been smuggling stuff in between the worlds this whole time, and it's actually not permitted to do that. He's breaking all the laws. That actually lands him in a little bit of a spot of trouble. At which point he bumps into Lila, who's the other main character. She's a thief who lives in the ordinary Grey London. She is looking for adventure.
It's definitely a solid beginning to the series. It sets up the world and the characters pretty admirably. And there's definitely the feel of a Tolkien influence.
I don't know if it was so much an influence as just there's a lot of like nods and homages, little Easter eggs in there. Yeah, I found to be hilarious, and I just really enjoyed just having these slight nods and pokes and references to another work. Kind of lent an air of lightheartedness to this book, even though it does touch on some like pretty serious things, like violent murders and like attempted rapes and all kind of pretty dark stuff. But it was actually kind of a fun read, despite all that.
I really enjoyed the characters in this book, specifically the character of Lila Bard. I feel like with a weaker writer, she would have been a combination of annoying and unbelievable, but V. Schwab made her more personable in a sense. Like, she was more likable. She lent all the humorous moments in the book. I don't know, V. Schwab did well with this character.
Towards the end, I was predicting something would happen with regards to this character. And I was like, oh yeah, she's gonna do this, and then it's gonna go like that. For sure, that's, because that's how it always happens, right? Credit to V. Schwab, Lila's character did not develop in that really easy way that would have probably been detrimental. It would have been like a giant MacGuffin, basically, at the end, and it would have made it stupid, like, oh, okay, great. But that didn't happen, and the ending was actually like one of the strongest points of the book. If you like, possibly spoiler alert, but if you like an ending where the bad guys get what's coming, you're going to love this book. There are comeuppances to be had, and they get handed out one after another.
I thought the villains of the book, Astrid and Athos, I felt they were actually very cartoon villainy, and they just didn't seem real enough to me. Didn't really feel any more like, oh yeah, these are like really bad guys, and I can see why they're like so horrible. They just seemed very cartoonish to me.
Yeah, that's true. They did stick that one random kid character who, I think he didn't bow down when the king was passing by, and so he gets like arrested and he gets punished in some like really horrific way. That's clearly there just to illustrate how evil these monarchs are, but it's just this one little awkward incident, so I can kind of see that.
I also kind of thought the ending was rushed. It seemed like it was an outline that V. Schwab sort of filled in, like bullet point summaries that became sentences from those bullet point summaries. And I felt like it could have used maybe 10 more pages. Maybe those bullet points could have gone from sentences to paragraphs.
I think part of the problem is that when you have an ending that ends in an epic showdown, how long are you going to spend on that battle scene? Is it going to be like Dragon Ball Z, where an entire episode is the two characters charging up their power and it flashes back and forth between the two of them? No, you're going to have like an awesome action sequence. And then once that wraps up, you want to finish on that high note, right? So you don't want to spend another 10 chapters detailing exactly what happens after. It is rushed, but I think it's a necessity to rush through what happens after the final showdown, because at that point, you want the reader to still feel that exhilaration and that thrill they got from that action sequence they just read and come away from the book with that. And if you spend too much time explaining what happens afterward, you're going to lose some of that feeling. So having just one short chapter at the end to wrap up all the loose ends, while seeming kind of rushed, was a necessity in this case.
I think there's a happy medium. I see what you're saying, but even the battle sequences themselves, I mean, no one needs a Goku versus Vegeta or whomever staring at each other for 30 minutes type thing. But at the same time, this is sort of like if an episode was, instead of 30 minutes, 30 seconds long. That's how I felt the whole ending was. There could have been a lot more in the fight between the villains and the heroes. Maybe more will come in the next two books that she didn't want to reveal too much. But I'm going to assume like there is more to come in the next two books that sort of come back to this ending. And she didn't want to reveal her hand too soon. And it very much felt like if she were maybe a little more willing to show her cards, it would have felt a little more natural to me.
I guess that makes sense.
I did notice that there are some loose ends that she obviously didn't tie up for a reason. Like, there were storylines that seemed to just exist but not really flow with the rest of the story. And it was kind of weird, but then I realized, you know what? I bet it's going to play a role somewhere down the line. I really enjoyed this book. I had a lot of fun with it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars because I did think that ending was a bit rushed. If the next two books don't develop on the characters more, don't take the plot threads that were in this book and never finished, I might have to downgrade this book because I do see a lot of potential in this book and it gets its 4 out of 5 because of all the potential that I see. But if it doesn't live up to that potential, if the plot threads that start in this book don't get finished, if the characters remain as static characters throughout the next two books without any change, then, that'll be a problem. But yeah, this book is a lot of fun. I do think it could stand on its own if you don't care about, like, the random plot threads that don't get finished. It's definitely worth a read.
So for me, I gave it a 4.5 stars. I think it's a fantastic book. I would have given it 5 stars except for, like we mentioned, the slightly rushed ending. but I do kind of understand that. The other thing I didn't like was I felt like the character development for the monarchs of Red London was not as good as it could have been, given that they are Kel's adoptive parents, and the large portion of the book is from his point of view, and you don't get that sense in his interactions with them that familiarity is kind of not quite there. Yeah, other than that, it's a really strong book. I really loved it. 4.5 rounds up to 5 for me. Really, really strong novel from V. Schwab, and definitely looking forward to trying out the other ones in the series.
I do have to say that there are prequel comics or graphic novels coming out about the King and Queen of Red London, so that will probably be what you're looking for there. I did want to talk about how some people classify this book as YA because the characters are so young, and also V.E. Schwab, when she writes under her actual name Victoria Schwab, those books are YA, but she does not classify these books as YA herself. What are your thoughts on that?
Basically, it's a fantasy series. I feel like the YA category kind of just a marketing tool in today's publishing industry. So if you had published this book like in 1980, people were talking about it today, they would not be talking about it as YA. They'd be talking about it as like, oh yeah, this is one of the fantasy classics to come out of the 80s. The reason we're having this conversation is because the YA category is being pushed and promoted really hard by the industry right now. And to some extent, calling this book YA might even get it more readers. So whatever marketing that they want to employ, that's fine.
If you're a reader who hesitates to read books because they're YA, you think that I'm too old for YA, it's below my reading level, I'm not interested in it. Like Serge said, I do think it's very much marketing for this book. I can see an argument being made for it, but I do think that if you like fantasy books, then this is definitely a book you should check out. If you like fantasy YA, I can see an argument for you to classify this book in that genre as well. It's well worth the read, too.
If you're one of those people that, for whatever reason, thinks that YA is beneath you, you're not going to read this book for that reason, I can reassure you and say that, this book doesn't really have any of those classic YA tropes. It's not a cookie cutter boy meets world storyline. It's nothing like that. Nobody discovers themselves and grows up in this book. You get some characters and you meet them and you interact with them over the course of maybe like 3 or 4 days. It's just a quick, fast-paced action fantasy story. End of the day, it has a beautiful world building, and if you're into that kind of stuff, then you're probably going to like it.
I feel like good books transcend whatever genre you're trying to shove them into, so this is one of those books.
Yeah, and again, going back to how we found out about the book, it was on everyone's bookshelf. That itself should speak volumes about this being a pretty quality read.
So yeah, check it out. Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab.
And with that being said, after the intermission, we are going to review the next iteration of the Fear Street series, Fear Street Super Chiller, Broken Hearts.
Violets are blue, roses are red. On Valentine's Day, Josie will be dead.
And with that, we're going to launch right into prediction accuracy for Fear Street Super Chiller Broken Hearts.
In my predictions, I said that it'd be Valentine's Day, girls would be getting Valentines that they don't want, and somewhere along the line, someone dies because of all the creepy guys from Fear Street's past. Well, girl was getting Valentines that they didn't want.
Oh, sorry, Anna. Your prediction accuracy is kind of on par with what I normally get with these. So I'm feeling you. I'm feeling your pain right now.
I said it'd be a male murderer, which was wrong. I said that the victim would be female, which one of them was.
That's predictably correct, yeah.
And I said the cause of death would be strangulation, which was wrong.
I fared much better on this prediction outing. I said that the broken hearts around Valentine's Day are going to be leading to some jealousy, and we're going to see a revenge killing. And that's fairly accurate. There is jealousy going on, and there is a revenge killing. I said the murder would be female, and that was correct. And the murder victim female is also correct. So I got that right. And then I said the cause of death would be a broken heart due to a wound to the heart from a knife. I don't think there's any wounds to a heart. I think I'm going to give myself some credit because knife is a weapon, A, and B, the murder that does occur is a bladed weapon, as a knife also is. It's a stab wound. So I'm going to give myself a good solid 75% on this one. So let's get into plot synopsis. Just to get a couple quick things out of the way, this is a super chiller, so the book is a little bit longer. At the start of the school year, a horrific horseback riding accident shatters a friend group. Months later, threatening Valentine's cards and hurt feelings come together to put lives on the line.
We know that's like kind of a weird summary, but this is kind of a weird long book.
Yeah, it is basically a super chiller, and super chillers tend to be longer, about 300 pages, more along the lines of a full-length novel.
213, 220.
Okay. It felt longer. I'm not sure why.
So let's get into the characters. We actually have a family with 3 sisters here. They all live on Fear Street. We start with Erica McLean. She's 14 years old. She's the youngest of the 3.
She gets picked on by her sisters a lot, but she's finally starting high school, and she is nervous and excited about that.
We're not going to go much into her character description because we never actually get one from R.L. Stine. You do get one from her crueler older sister who is constantly diminishing her looks and all that, which you can't really take what her sister says with a grain of salt because she is kind of cruel and mean about everything. And the cruel sister's name is
Josie McLean.
Josie McLean is 16 years old. She's untwins with her sister Rachel. They're actually twins, but because they're so different from each other, they actually call each other untwins.
She has dark brown hair and dark flashing eyes. Moodier and more temperamental and more unpredictable than her twin sister, she has worked hard to look different from her twin. She keeps her hair short, always wears long jangling earrings, and she works all summer to get a good tan. She also usually wears t-shirts.
She goes through boyfriends very quickly, and she's very cruel when she breaks up with them. She just tosses them aside like dolls. She has no regard for their feelings at all. In the beginning of the book, she's dating a guy named Jinkman, and she's already talking about, like, seeing other guys while dating him. And then later in the book, she's dating a guy named Steve Barron. He's good looking in an all-American way, with wavy blonde hair, clear blue eyes, a perfect straight nose, lopsided grin, and broad shoulders.
Probably like a football jock, maybe he wears like a leather jacket all the time. Her twin sister, Rachel, is kind of like the beautiful one. Both her and Josie are considered beautiful, but Rachel's got this thing going. She's got an oval-shaped face with creamy white skin and large olive green eyes. She has a pretty face framed by long copper-colored reddish hair, and it's like really long. She doesn't cut it, goes all the way down to her waist, something like that. She's probably like really proud of it. She's the cool and calm one. She's got a soft, whispery voice and a confident, deliberate manner. She kind of has everything come easily to her. She moves easily through life. She does love to shop and dress trendy. She's dating Luke Hoskins. They've been going together for like 2 years now.
Luke Hoskins is described as being tall and lanky, with stooped shoulders as if he's trying to make himself short. He has short, light brown hair, neatly parted on the left and brushed to the side. He has a slender, nervous face framed by silver-rimmed glasses, and he has a tiny gold ball earring. Next we have Melissa Davis. She actually lives on Fear Street across from the McLean sisters.
And she's basically best friends with Josie and Rachel.
But she does, give Erica the time of day. Erica is constantly teased by her sisters. Melissa does try to, bring Erica into the fold and talk to her and ask her questions. All the stuff that a nice person does. She's pretty with a lively animated face framed by long jet black hair. She drives a blue Firebird, and she's dating a guy named Dave Kinley, who is one of Josie's many exes.
Dave Kinley is described as having long, scraggly black hair down to his collar, small round eyes, and a bent nose. He's easygoing and happy-go-lucky, with a warm, winning smile to go along with his great sense of humor. He does have a little bit of a wild and angry side, and he's kind of immature, which is probably why Josie dumped him.
This episode of Rhett Read Podcast is brought to you by Shady Side Saddlery. We don't horse around with safety. Nay, we don't.
Let's get into the in-depth plot. Yeah, this one has a lot to go over. It's got a lot going on. There's a lot of twists and turns, kind of threads to this story that all get tied together.
The book starts with a prologue set in September. Erica, her sisters, and their friend Melissa go to the Shady Side Riding Club, mainly because the stable hand there, Chuck, is super hot, and the girls just want to go ogle him.
The first time they went, the older girls all lied to Chuck in order to impress him, and they told him, "Oh yeah, we're expert riders." They're really just hitting on him.
Yeah, it was actually their first time ever riding. This time when they show up, other customers actually show up and get Chuck's attention, so he just tells the girl to saddle their own horses.
Because he's like, oh, they said that they were experienced. Erica decides that she doesn't want to go, so she lies about a stomach ache. And the other girls don't believe her, but they don't want to waste time arguing. They want to hit the trail.
Rachel actually struggles to put her horse's saddle on, so she gets Josie to actually do it for her. Josie loosens the horse's girth and asks Melissa to check it out. Melissa's already on her horse a little bit away, so she just sort of peers over and goes, yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, it looks good from where I'm sitting. On top of, like, the saddle not being whatever, Rachel's horse is actually skittish and freaks out a lot. Even when she's trying to get onto him, he's kind of like, whoa.
He's already, like, bucking her a little bit.
A, she's got a weird temperamental horse, and B, the saddle, she had trouble putting it on, and it's like their second time riding. They have no business doing this themselves.
Well, let's add C to the list, because Rachel actually doesn't wear a helmet. She hates wearing helmets, and she wants to leave the stable before anyone notices that she's not wearing a helmet.
Right, it would mess up her beautiful long hair, I guess. The girls take their horses out, and they like kind of riot and gossip as they go through the woods. But the entire time, Rachel is struggling with her horse, and as they're heading back, Rachel actually is struggling to control the horse's speed.
Yeah, it's like in a canter while the other two are walking their horse, and it just won't slow down. And they keep saying, just pull the reins. But that only seems to get the horse more agitated, and it's like galloping at this point.
As it happens, a dog comes out of nowhere and spooks Rachel's horse. The horse rears up, and then it drops its head, and Rachel's saddle just slides right off. Just like slides forward and flips Rachel onto the ground head first. Bam.
And then we skip forward to February, a few months later.
It's a horrible accident, and in the few months that have transpired since this horrific accident, Melissa's been having recurring nightmares about it. We find out right away that Rachel actually did survive, but she is very severely injured. Melissa visits Rachel at home, but Rachel doesn't really talk a lot. She just stares a lot. And Josie and Melissa aren't even friends anymore because Josie blames Melissa for the accident. So basically, Rachel is just mentally just completely altered.
Well, she's cognitively about maybe 5 or 6 years old.
There's like a loss of oxygen to the brain, probably a prolonged period of time, I'm guessing, and that's what's caused this.
That's not what I would say. Loss of perfusion to many parts of the brain due to the injury. You can have like a horrible contusion. The way you're saying it, it would have to be like a respiratory issue, but then she would be paralyzed.
Isn't it possible that she got like knocked out and she stopped breathing? I didn't see the girls rushing to give her first aid.
Best they don't, because they would have probably paralyzed her. If she had any respiratory issues, that sort of injury, it becomes an injury of your central nervous system. She'd be having a lot more issues than just whatever issues she's having now. That's why I wouldn't say it's a lack of oxygen. I would just say it's like a TBI.
It is like a really horrific outcome. She's not who she used to be. She doesn't remember a lot.
She is at the cognitive level of a 5 or 6 year old. These type of injuries doesn't usually lead to like that sort of cognitive decline. This is like the overblown Hollywood type. It's a little different from what I would expect clinically, but I guess for the sake of this story, it would be like this. That's fine, whatever.
Right, so Melissa not being friends with Josie is not the only consequence of this.
You also find that Josie's pretty affected by the accident with Rachel, but you don't actually find out right away how she's affected. You just sort of see her being the Josie that you're introduced to. So you find out that she dumped Jankman right after Rachel's accident. She's dating Steve now. You kind of open with Steve and Josie hanging out after school. And you find out that this is something they do a lot. And you find out why Josie does this eventually. But for now, it just makes her seem super cruel. She's hanging out with Steve. And when she goes home, she finds this like Valentine's card.
Yeah, it's pretty heinous. Basically, she opens it up, and it's a death threat that she's gonna die on Valentine's Day.
Steve thinks it's a joke.
And Josie thinks it's probably from Jankman, because he's also been, like, calling her and pestering her a lot, because he didn't take the breakup very well.
Well, Steve tells her to just ignore it, because he's a very helpful boyfriend.
As they're about to leave, because Josie doesn't want to hang around the house very much anymore, Rachel actually startles them in the kitchen by trying to choke Josie.
Erica, who is supposed to be watching Rachel, and Luke, who often comes over to be with Rachel because, they were dating for 2 years prior to the accident, they were distracted while they were supposed to be looking after her, and Rachel would just run off.
She runs into the kitchen and chokes Josie. I mean, that's kind of like, she's not all there mentally. It's really sad, but...
You're introduced to the new family dynamics. Before, we were saying, the two twins used to tease Erica a lot. It was just the two of them, and Erica's all by herself. And now you see that Erica is sort of motherly. She's very gentle and patient when it comes to Rachel. She's constantly looking after her. She's constantly having this responsibility thrust upon her because Josie is constantly reneging on her responsibilities. When it's Josie's time to watch her, she's not there. It has to be Erica. The family can only afford to have help on the weekend. Their mom is working long hours at a phone company. Their dad is constantly on the road checking on his chain of hardware stores. So it really is up to Erica and Josie to help with Rachel after school. And because Josie doesn't show up, it is only Erica. So your first introduction to this dynamic is literally Josie going to the mall with Steve instead of taking her shift to look after Rachel.
You're always running out and leaving me with Rachel. You and I are supposed to take turns. You know we can't afford help for her during the week. I'll take my turn. Don't worry about it, Josie said with a sneer.
Luke tries to help Erica out by shaming Josie to do her share. Erica also tries again, saying, you only care about the dog, Muggy. Why don't you give your sister half the amount of attention that you give this dog? And Josie gives zero shits. She's just like, whatever.
She just walks out and goes to the mall with her boyfriend, and that's that.
And the sad thing is, Steve seems to be more uncomfortable with all of this than Josie does. Like, he keeps looking at her like, we can go to the mall another day. She's like, no, I want to go now. And he's like, okay.
Yep.
It's really awkward.
After they leave, Rachel digs through the mail, and everyone can see the creepy Valentine that Josie got. Rachel just can't stop giggling about it, and Erica is gobsmacked.
Luke just starts raging about Josie. It turns out he blames Josie for Rachel's accident because she didn't fasten the saddle correctly.
Erica realizes that Luke resents Josie and he's carrying a lot of anger. He comes around all the time and he still hasn't found a new girlfriend. He's kind of just still really attached to Rachel, even though she's really not Rachel anymore. We kind of understand what the whole dynamic is. The friend group broke apart. Rachel is not herself anymore. Josie's just kind of running away from her responsibilities, and Erica is trying to keep everything together as best she can.
A few days later, it's Wednesday. After school, Josie's heading out to meet Steve. Except, she was supposed to watch Rachel?
Erica is frantically trying to get Josie to go home, since Erica really wants to try out for the drama club's production of Brigadoon. She scheduled this ahead of time. It's her freshman year of high school. She wants to participate. She wants to have a normal high school experience, and she feels that it's unfair that she's always watching Rachel. But Josie just kind of doesn't care, and is like, forget it, I'm gonna go to the mall.
What's worse about it is, as Erica is running out trying to get Josie has this really cruel internal monologue. She's looking at Erica run to her and she's just like, wow, she looks like a big clumsy bird trying to take off. She's not as pretty as Rachel or myself. Her face is too round. She could lose some weight. This is literally what her thought process is as Erica's running to her.
And then when Erica shows up and starts begging Josie to take care of Rachel like she promised, Josie completely blows her off.
Erica says it's not her full-time job to take care of Rachel. They're supposed to do it together. She's a freshman in high school. She's supposed to be experiencing new things. Josie needs to help her. After all, it is Josie's fault that Rachel had an accident.
And as soon as she says it, Erica feels really bad, but she doesn't have really time to apologize because just then Dave throws a snowball right at Josie, hits her in the head, and she kind of takes that as her excuse to just storm off and go meet with Steve. Erica's completely stuck. She can't go try out because somebody's got to take care of Rachel, and she's coming back from her special needs school, and so she needs to be home for that. So she kind of just trudges off to look after Rachel. And we cut to Melissa and Dave. We're standing together, and Melissa's like, Dave, why the heck did you throw that snowball at Josie? Is it because you're still not over how she dumped you?
Dave just talks about how he just doesn't like Josie. He wants to form an anti-Josie club with Luke. And he talks about the previous beef he had with Josie. Josie's dad was supposed to give him a job at one of their family hardware stores over the holidays, but it was canceled last minute. He thinks it has to be Josie's doing because Dave really needed the job. He really needed the money. And he thinks that because Josie is how Josie is, she must have told her dad to not hire him. And it was just her being her cruel old self.
Now we gotta see who the people are that might be sending Josie these threatening Valentine's Day cards. We've got Jenkman, her ex, who's like basically stalking her, calling her up all the time and isn't accepting that they broke up. You got Luke, really like carries a lot of anger and resentment. He blames her for the accident. Maybe he's the one that's sending her these threatening messages. Not only does he see the accident as being her fault, he's also seeing how she's shirking all her responsibilities. And then you have this Dave guy who's now dating Melissa. We find out that Dave really, really hates her too. He's like throwing snowballs at her. There's a lot of possibilities here for who might be like trying to threaten her.
Later that night, Josie goes home after hanging out with Steve, and, she's greeted by the dog Muggy, and she's really excited. She, plays with Muggy for a little bit, and then she goes to the den to do her homework. And while she's doing all this, she just keeps thinking, maybe I should check on Rachel. I'll do it later.
She's kind of just putting it off. Now, at this point, we get introduced to the fact that after Rachel's accident, they put an intercom system all throughout the house so that you can call up any room from any other room just by pressing a button. It's a way to allow Rachel to call for help if she needs anything.
But it's kind of a creepy intercom because there's a lot of crackling, voices sound distant yet near, and it just sounds like there's ghosts deep inside the house.
All of a sudden, Luke bursts into the den. He's really upset on Erica's behalf. He, really tears into Josie. He tells her, look, this tryout for the Brigadoon was really important to Erica. Erica was so excited for freshman year, and you're just being really selfish. Josie tells him to calm down. Luke is just too angry. He says that Josie ruined Rachel's life and is now trying to ruin Erica's.
Josie responds by calling Luke a loser, tells him that he's hiding behind Rachel because he's too big a loser to face the real world. Luke just snaps. He attacks her with the silver letter opener. They're both really shocked that he does this. Josie's staring at him, and Luke just ends up stabbing the top of the mahogany desk, and he just runs out of the house.
At this point, Erica calls Josie on the intercom and lets her know that 1, she's late, and 2, Rachel wants to see her.
Well, Josie brushes them off. She's upset that everyone just seems mad at her. She just wants to be left alone. How dare they bother her?
She finds another Valentine's Day card. The card says that she's gonna die on Valentine's Day,
which is 3 days away. So at 12:30 that night, Josie is awoken by Rachel calling her over the intercom. She keeps asking Josie to come and why she's not there yet.
When Josie gets to Rachel's room, she finds Rachel is fast asleep in her bed, clearly not in any position to be calling her over the intercom.
So Josie just goes back to her bed, and right when she's about to fall asleep, Rachel just starts calling her on the intercom again.
Josie goes back to Rachel's room to make sure she's okay, but Rachel's still asleep in her bed.
Josie sort of nopes out of there back to her room, and then she just hears breathing and soft laughter on the intercom.
That's kind of creepy.
So, Thursday afternoon, Erica is brushing Rachel's hair, and she's seething. She had arranged a special tryout for the drama club with the advisor, which is the day after she was supposed to have her audition.
I guess she begged the drama club advisor and arranged a special tryout.
But at the end of the day, Josie's nowhere to be found. So Erica just resigns herself to the situation and goes home.
So she's gonna miss out on Brigadoon.
Rachel's asking when Josie will visit her and if she's related to Josie.
Which is really sad.
And then she just starts saying that Josie must hate her because she never visits. She hates Josie. And she starts repeating that she hates Josie.
They're interrupted by a phone call from Jenkman asking if Josie received his Valentine's Day card.
Earlier that day, Melissa, Dave, and Josie have a math test. Dave is freaking out because he's missed a few days of school and he's sure he'll fail. This test is worth half their grade.
In the middle of the test, Josie goes up to the teacher and she asks to switch seats. Dave is sitting behind Josie, and Josie is sure that Dave is cheating off of her. Josie is allowed to switch to another seat, and the teacher calls Dave to the front after the test. He gets an automatic fail.
Yeah, he's failing a test worth half his grade. And because he's cheating, he's going to get kicked off the wrestling team. He's going to lose any chance of a college scholarship, which is what he needed to get into college. And he is understandably pissed.
Right, although he was cheating and that was bad. Anyway, as Josie walks by after class, Dave grabs her and starts screaming at her in the middle of the hallway, blames her for everything.
Josie takes it like you would expect Josie would. She just sort of goes, "You deserve it," ends up walking away.
Yeah, I didn't ask you to cheat off of me. We could have both gotten into trouble if I didn't say anything.
Dave ends up screaming at the top of his lungs about how much he hates Josie and how she's wrecking his life, and everyone in the hallway just sort of watching him freak out.
Later, Josie's at home, and Rachel is once again calling for her over the intercom. Josie really doesn't want to deal with any of this, so she bails out. She leaves the house and goes to meet with Steve at Shadyside Indoor Ice Skating Rink.
They actually have a really good time, but while they're chatting, Josie mentions how Erica is the real skater in the family, and the mood of the night sort of shifts.
Josie tells Steve about how unhappy she is. She feels guilty about Rachel. She sees Rachel as lost potential, how she'll never grow up, never have a family of her own, and she wants to cry every time she looks at her.
Erica just makes everything worse. She tries to make Josie feel guilty about not spending time with Rachel or Erica. Erica is the worst, in Josie's opinion. Erica won't give her space to deal with things. Erica makes her feel guilty, and Erica just doesn't realize how bad Josie feels.
Josie breaks down crying. She says she loves Rachel, but she just can't stand to be with her, to see what's happened to her. She stays away as much as possible and only goes home when absolutely necessary so that she doesn't have to deal with or be confronted by all of these painful thoughts.
Steve has no clue how to deal with this, and he just sort of gives her the general, "you'll get better" platitudes. Josie reveals to Steve that she's received yet another creepy Valentine, telling her that she'll die on Valentine's Day.
Steve still thinks that it's a joke, and that it's probably just Jenkman trying to get revenge for her dumping him.
Which is the same conversation that they had earlier. They hang out with each other till pretty late, and when Josie gets home, she goes to the kitchen to get herself a nice drink.
There's something sticky underfoot. Big, red, sticky puddles of blood. And right in front of her is Muggy, her cute little terrier, dead on its back, its head twisted, with a silver letter opener sticking out of its stomach.
Well, we flip briefly to Melissa's point of view. You do find out that she spent some of the night with Erica and Rachel and everything was okay. And then when she got home, she talked to Dave. He lets her know that he's been kicked off the team officially, his future college plans are done, and he hates Josie. Like, she is the worst and he hates her. And then Melissa looks out the window and there are cops flocking the McLean house.
Josie and Erica are both in Erica's room talking about what happened. Erica was home the whole night, but didn't hear anything out of the ordinary. Josie is sure that Jenkman killed Muggy. Erica lets Josie know it wasn't him. He's been sending Valentine's Day cards to Josie, but not the creepy ones, funny ones. There's a hint of resentment in Erica's voice as she's relaying this to Josie.
Josie accuses Erica of being too naive to understand the nuances of this Josie-Jenkman non-relationship, and Erica must have a crush on Jenkman to, go along with this story.
Yeah, and she actually does have a crush on Jenkman. It's kind of like a little subplot where, anytime, she sees him, her heart beats a little faster and she blushes.
Josie is about to call the police to tell them to investigate Jenkman when Erica says that it might be Luke.
Yeah, because he's so angry at Josie, and we know about that one incident with the letter opener. But Josie says that he's too much of a wimp to do it. Mrs. McLean interrupts and has Josie go brush Rachel's hair. She's too excited, and getting her hair brushed always tends to calm her down. As Josie brushes Rachel's hair, Rachel starts repeating, "Somebody really hates you, Josie. Somebody really hates you, Josie."
It's Saturday, Valentine's Day.
Uh-oh. Steve comes over to pick Josie up just as Luke is leaving after giving Rachel a box of chocolates.
Steve can't decide whether Luke is a great guy for sticking with Rachel, or if there's something wrong with him for not moving on.
What would you do in that situation? I mean, it's so tough.
Kind of reminds me of the Lila Garrity-Jason Street relationship from Friday Night Lights.
Right, exactly. Josie just wants to enjoy her date with Steve. She actually received another death threat Valentine's Day card. She figures she might as well enjoy her last day alive.
Josie initially wanted to enjoy a nice night at home until Rachel starts repeating, "Somebody really hates you, Josie," over and over again on the intercom.
Josie can't get out of the house fast enough once that starts up.
Erica actually comes on the intercom and just pleads to Josie to just stay home tonight. She's overwhelmed taking care of Rachel and she just can't do it.
Josie cruelly tells Erica that since she has no date tonight, whatever, deal with it.
So with Erica pleading in the background, Josie and Steve leave.
They see Luke parked a few houses away, just sitting in his car staring at them. As they drive away, Josie begins to really have doubts about the night. She thinks there might be a chance that she'll die.
It's 2 a.m. and Erica's up and worried the fact that Josie's not home.
She calls Steve, who tells her that he and Josie had a fight at the skating rink, and they split up. Josie went off with a bunch of people, but she should be home by now.
As Erica hangs up with Steve, the doorbell rings. It's the same two cops that showed up after Muggy's murder, a young cop with red hair and an older bald guy with a salt and pepper mustache.
Josie's been murdered. Her body was found in the alley behind the ice rink.
They ID'd her with her wallet, which was found on her body. She wasn't robbed. Everything was still in there.
She was stabbed with the blade of an ice skate in the back.
Rachel greets everyone with, "Somebody really hates Josie."
That happened. Turns out all those Valentine's Day threats, they actually amounted to Josie actually getting killed.
Melissa gets a call from Dave the day after the murder. They meet at the corner, that coffee shop everyone goes to, and he reveals that he was the one who wrote those threatening cards to Josie, and he's worried that the cops will trace the cards back to him. He got this idea after the whole holiday job debacle. He originally wanted to send her creepy Christmas cards, but it's not a Christmas book, and those books belong to Reva Dalby, so obviously this was never going to happen. The thing is, Dave has no alibi for Josie's murder. He was driving alone during that murder time frame, and he's worried that maybe Erica showed the cars to the cops or something, and he's going to be in trouble. So Dave thinks of this harebrained scheme. He'll break into the McLean's house during Josie's funeral the next day, and he's going to steal those cards back.
So Dave goes through with this. During the funeral, he breaks into the McLean's house. He goes to Josie's desk. He starts rifling through it, going through her drawers, and he just can't find the cards anywhere.
He hears a car in the driveway and he realizes he needs to get out of there. As he's running out of the room, he's stopped by something ahead of him in the hallway.
Two cops burst in on Dave, and the scene in front of them. Dave is standing over Erica's body. There's blood everywhere, and Dave is holding the blood-covered letter opener.
We flash forward to 1 year later, and you find out things have changed in this past year. Dave is now in a military-style boarding school upstate.
Erica survived the stabbing after being rushed to the hospital. The police couldn't link Dave to Josie's murder, and Erica never pressed charges against Dave. She said it was too dark, and she was attacked from behind. She couldn't say for sure that it was him.
Erica wasn't at the funeral because she was still too upset to go to her sister's funeral. She heard some weird sounds through the intercom, so she called the police and went to investigate.
Dave says he found her body like that and picked up the bloody letter opener while still in shock over what happened. The police let Dave go, but he couldn't return to a normal life since everyone in Shadyside thought that he was guilty.
I mean, he has had too many run-ins with McLean's, so...
Yeah, that's true.
You find that Melissa is now with Luke. Luke realized that the only way to continue living his life was not going over to the McLean's anymore. He realized that Rachel wasn't going to get better. She was never going to go back to the Rachel that he knew. The only way that he could move on with his life was just to accept that and move on.
Him stopping his visits was a really big setback for Rachel. She was doing the best that she could under the circumstances, and his constant visits and his presence was really helping her. But now that he's no longer there, it's really taking a toll on her.
So Melissa and Luke are making plans for Valentine's Day, and Melissa finds one of those threatening Valentines, the same kind Josie was getting.
Luke thinks it's a joke, but Melissa reminds him what happened to Josie.
So Luke gets Melissa to compare the card with a letter that Dave had sent her from military school. The writing matches.
Melissa gets a call from Dave's mom, telling her that Dave has run away from military school and his whereabouts are currently unknown.
Well, we switch over to Erica brushing Rachel's hair. Rachel is asking if Luke is coming, and Erica reminds Rachel that Luke is dating Melissa now. He's not going to come. And Rachel just starts repeating that she hates Melissa.
Erica manages to calm Rachel down, and then she gets a phone call from Steve Barron. He's inviting her to go ice skating for Valentine's Day.
She has to turn him down because she has to watch Rachel that day. Steve gets a bit upset with her and tells her that she needs to live her own life. It sounds a lot more cruel than it is because you constantly got hints the previous year that he actually felt Erica was being shafted. He wanted to say something the entire time. He kept telling Josie, we should stay, but Josie was the one saying, no, we're not. He didn't want to argue with her about it. So it was nice to see him say something. It's just weird. It seems like they didn't have any contact since the previous year, and they didn't really have much contact previously, so it did feel a little weird, but it was nice to see.
Erica's feeling pretty down at the moment, and then she realizes that Rachel has walked out of the house. When Erica finally gets her, Rachel starts repeating, "Did I scare you?"
Melissa heads over to the McLean house. She has gotten closer to Erica in the past year, and she lets Erica know that Dave's escaped from school. And then she tells Erica that she's receiving the same Valentine cards that Josie had. Erica is kind of terrified at the prospect of Dave maybe coming back to Shadyside, and she is sure that he'll come back to finish the job of killing her.
Later that night, at the McLeans, Erica hears someone walking around the house. Her parents aren't home, and it's not Rachel, so Erica goes to investigate.
It's Luke. He's leaving a Valentine for Rachel. He has tried to move on, but he still does feel his connection with her, and he does want her to get Valentine cards because he seems to be that type of guy.
The type of guy that sneaks around somebody's home late at night, uninvited.
Well, Erica doesn't let him leave before him hearing how devastated Rachel was when he stopped coming by. She really, put him on that guilt train.
Back at Melissa's house, she's struggling to fall asleep when she's startled by someone climbing in through her window. It's Dave!
He seems a little upset that she seems scared of him, that maybe she doesn't believe that he's not a murderer. Melissa's just like, no. She's actually upset that he broke into her house, went into her room, and then seems to be mad at her.
So Dave claims that he knows who the real murderer is, and he's out to clear his name in Shadyside. Melissa asks him, okay, well, why did you send me the creepy Valentine's Day cards? And that seems to confuse him. But when he has to take a look at it, he says that what he sees actually confirms his theory as to who the murderer is.
Then Dave leaves without telling Melissa his theory. Come on, dude.
This happens so much in stories where the writer wants to build suspense. The character goes I know who it is, and then they leave before they tell anybody. That also casts doubt on Dave, because okay, maybe he's just saying that. Oh, I know who it is. Definitely not me. Yeah, I know who it is, but I'm not going to tell you. Okay, maybe it is him, right? You still have some doubt.
The next day, Melissa is looking after Rachel, while Erica is at rehearsal for Guys and Dolls. Rachel keeps telling Melissa that she can go out by herself, while Melissa's kind of spacing out and thinking about how sad Rachel's situation is.
They play outside together in the leaf pile when Erica gets home. Melissa lets Erica know what happened with Dave, and Erica really wants to know the details. But Melissa doesn't really know anything.
'Cause Dave left without telling her?
Right. Rachel starts her new chant of, "Somebody hates Erica. Somebody hates Erica."
Before going to bed that night, Melissa hears this ruckus outside her window. She hears this banging, she hears this clanging, and when she looks out, she sees this streak of long red hair and a girl running across her front yard.
The noise outside wakes up her parents, who call the police. Melissa is trying to convince her parents that she saw Rachel outside when she's interrupted by the police.
It's a heavy, bald, paunchy older man with a younger blonde partner. They asked the Davis family when they discovered the body, which confuses everyone because they thought it was a B&E, a breaking and entering.
The police head over to the McLean's house because Rachel was spotted leaving the scene. It was Dave's body they found, stabbed to death outside Melissa's house. Both Erica and her mom try to plead with the cops since Rachel isn't allowed outside on her own. But as the police start to question Rachel, she starts saying that she can go out, and she goes out all the time.
They think that this is something, but then they start questioning her for a couple of minutes and they realize it definitely is not Rachel. Melissa and Erica are both pretty freaked out when they talk about it in school.
They then talk about the skating party on the lake on Valentine's Day. Neither one wants to stay home and think of how morbid things are. Erica goes to rehearsal, and Melissa finds another Valentine threat on her locker.
It's basically a variation of the cover. Someone has written, "You're gonna die, you're next," on her locker. We finally make it to the Valentine's Day skating party. Everyone has to be careful though. There's a patch of ice that's already too thin to skate on, but it's pretty cool. There are torches all around to light up the skating area. There's music playing, there's refreshments. They went all out.
Melissa is an awful skater, and she's constantly falling over. But Luke gets her to skate away from the crowd to give her a private lesson, and he skates them right over to the thin ice. Nice going, Luke.
They're far from the lit up skating area. The people are all over there. The music is just like this distant sound. And Melissa is freaking out. Luke skates up menacingly up to her. She doesn't know what to do. And then he tries to kiss her.
Melissa is both freaked out and angry. She thinks he's being super insensitive about the death threats. Doesn't understand where she's coming from, where she's really scared. Josie got killed last year after getting all the same Valentines, and he's just goofing around, pretending to be all threatening and stuff. That's not funny. After a brief argument, she gets Luke to just skate a few laps without her.
She'll just meet up with him at the refreshment table because she realizes that Luke is probably not going to have a fun time skating with her. She is truly an awful skater. She can't go a few feet without just falling all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But as Luke skates away, she realizes that she's in a really creepy part of the ice. It's dark, secluded, like everyone is far away, and she is trying to like get to the crowd as fast as she can, falling every little bit. After the 20th time falling, she looks up and sees this hooded figure with a lowered head hiding the skater's face coming towards her.
She sees that the hooded figure is holding a silver knife, and Melissa is now like, shit just got real, and she's more freaked out, and she's just kind of like trying to skate back, but she can't. She ends up almost falling again, and the hooded figure is just gaining on her, lifts up her hood, and long red hair is just flowing out from under the hood.
Well, Melissa starts pleading, saying things like, Rachel, please, don't do it. And then she gets stabbed in the side.
Yep.
But luckily for her, she's wearing one of those super puffy coats, and it's thick enough that the blade goes in, but it doesn't touch her.
The attacker is prepared to stab again, but Melissa tries to fight for the knife. She's also trying to keep her balance at the same time.
She manages to rip off the attacker's wig, throw the attacker off balance, and regain her own balance, all at the same time.
Maybe Luke's lessons paid off, but the big reveal is, it's not Rachel, as you may have suspected, and as nobody saw coming, at least not me. It's Erica!
Erica took advantage of Dave sending those Valentines to kill Josie. Josie had to die because she was responsible for Rachel's accident, but took no responsibility. She was responsible for ruining Erica's life by not taking responsibility for Rachel's accident. When Dave broke into the house to take back the Valentines, she stabbed herself. After all, as she says, it was easy compared to the pain I already felt.
She was nervous that people would figure out that she killed Josie, but Dave breaking in gave her the perfect excuse. When Dave came back and started to figure things out, she had to kill him.
And now she has to kill Melissa, because Melissa has everything. She even took Luke away, so Erica is truly alone.
She's wearing a red wig from the drama club, because this revenge is for both herself and Rachel.
Just as Erica is prepared to stab Melissa again, the ice below them gives way. Luke, who is already skating towards them during the confrontation, manages to pull Melissa out.
And just as Luke is about to grab onto Erica, she slips under the ice. Her last words are, "I did it all for you, Rachel." They're desperately trying to look into the hole in the ice and trying to grab onto Erica. And then they finally see Erica trapped under a sheet of ice. She's staring up at them, not moving.
Why doesn't she move? Why doesn't she swim out from under there? Melissa cried hysterically, gripping Luke's arm. Why is she staring up at us like that? She isn't moving at all. I don't think she wants to come up, Luke said quietly. Melissa stared in horror at the unmoving, wide-eyed face staring up at her, pressed up against the ice. Erica had been in prison for a year, staring out at the world. Now she's staring up at us from another prison.
A crowd of kids gather and try to help, and they're calling for help, but Erica ends up dying. The book ends with Melissa and Luke with Rachel 3 weeks later. Rachel is proudly showing them some of her artwork from school and telling them how she wishes her sisters were around. They leave and talk about how they haven't seen Rachel since Valentine's Day.
But then they say they don't want to talk about Valentine's Day anymore. It's not something they ever want to talk about ever again.
Melissa doesn't even want to see a Valentine's Day card ever again.
So next year, the plan is to give each other Groundhog's Day cards.
The end.
And now a word from our sponsors at Shady Side Saddlery.
I got you, babe.
Okay, campers, rise and shine. And don't forget your saddles, because there are horses out there. Shady Side Saddlery is your source for original Fear brand riding equipment. Family owned since 1898 with an unimaginable safety record. We don't horse around with your safety. Use coupon code RETREAD for a 10% discount on 10% of a saddle. Available only if you call 740-229-9618. Fear Street Mythos. We're super excited for this section.
We ended up coming up with a lot of ideas based on the findings from Broken Hearts. I think it all goes back to Groundhog Day. And let me just explain that for a second. When I got to the end of the book and Luke and Melissa are joking that next year they're going to give each other Groundhog's Day cards instead of Valentine's Day cards, I completely flipped out. It's the biggest mythos hint that R.L. Stine has ever dropped for us. I immediately had to go and look up what the release date for the movie Groundhog Day is. And it turns out that both the movie Groundhog Day and Fear Street Broken Hearts both came out in February of 1993, which is an amazing coincidence unless you realize that R.L. Stine knew about the movie and he's leaving this hint for us. The movie is about a repeating time loop and a man that's trying to break out of it. We've been bouncing around this theory for a while. What if Fear Street is a time loop? If you go back to the episode where we reviewed the Fear Street book Haunted, we actually are introduced to the first time loop that we know of in the Fear Street series, where there's a time paradox where the ghost of a deceased person is trying to prevent his own murder, but going into the past, right, and stopping it. That got us thinking, okay, what is it about Fear Street that can warp the fabric of space and time to allow this to happen? And we were thinking like, okay, maybe this is something to do with the property of that clay mineral. If that's the case, then obviously the corporation would be trying to exploit that property. But what if in doing so, they actually caused a much larger time loop to occur? Maybe on purpose, maybe accidentally, by doing something that they didn't quite understand, that was beyond their control. As we're reviewing more and more books, we're seeing a pattern. You get some stories in the fall, some stories happen in the spring that reference back to the fall. Then you get a cycle of summer vacation stories, and then lo and behold, you're in the next school year. And this cycle keeps repeating over and over again, and you can start counting the school years. And as we're counting off the school years, and we're seeing the same characters appear over and over again, especially Corey, who appeared in the first Fear Street book, The New Girl, you're starting to think like, wait a second, he's still here? I thought he was like a junior already that year, but I guess maybe he was a sophomore, and then he appears the next year, and it's like, oh, I guess maybe he was a freshman. You get to that point where by the time we're reviewing Fear Street 13, Secret Bedroom, which we do in episode 15 of Red Read Podcast. When we're doing the mythos, if you listen to the 47-minute mark, we're basically like, listen, this is probably the last possible school year that Corey could appear in. A little bit later, when we get to Fear Street book number 17, Best Friend, is the last time we see Corey up until now. We figured that was actually kind of the same school year as Secret Bedroom. There's a lot of indications that that happened during that same school year, especially because Secret Bedroom was in the fall. That was probably like the following spring. And then after that, we have a long lull. We don't really see Corey again for a while. We get some Super Chillers, we get the Fear Street Cheerleader series, and we get a whole bunch of vacation books. But throughout all that, you get another school cycle goes through. And now we're definitely in a time when Corey should be done and gone. And here we have Corey and David Metcalf are both in this book. And they're in the book after a 1-year time skip. Because this book takes place over 2 years. There's a time skip. They're still in school. We see 2 consecutive school years that they're in when chronologically, like 2 years ago, we thought would be his last year. And at that time, if you go back to that mythos section, Anna and I were thinking, wait a second. You go and you look at Haunted and you see that, yes, you can have time loops here. This is something that could be induced by what's going on at Fear Street. There's no reason that can't be explaining why these characters keep appearing over and over again. What if it's just looped right back to when Corey first started school? Fresh slate, erase everything that happened. I'm thinking that probably kind of makes sense. If you think about it, in this book, you have old and young police officers responding to crimes again. You actually had the same thing in the previous book. In The New Boy, you also had both young and old police officers at the police station. And I was thinking to myself, like, wait a second, how does this gel with what happened after Missing, where the FBI came and busted this cult that was deeply tied to the police, arrested like 100 or so townsfolk, including much of the police department, and ever after, we had like really young police officers responding to all the calls. Now all of a sudden, the police force got old again. What's going on? Now it makes sense. We've experienced a time loop and we've gone back and we've done a reset. So all of the things that happened in the previous loop, in this particular timeline, they didn't happen. That's what I'm thinking.
I would take a different approach. I agree that there's a time loop and we have a reset point, but I do think it is carefully controlled by the corporation. I'll have us look to an episode of Stargate SG-1. It was called Window of Opportunity. SG-1 goes to this planet. They're working with an archaeologist on a device. You eventually find out that this device is sort of like a time machine. Theoretically, it's supposed to allow whoever is using it to go back to a specific time of their choosing. But instead, what it does is just ends up looping time over and over again. It's a hilarious episode. there are ramifications that we can see that are similar to Fear Street. For instance, I think there's a property in Fear Street similar to the machine in the episode of Stargate. I think that the minerals that we talked about earlier, the mineral deposits on Fear Street, they do help create this temporal distortion that we saw in Haunted. But I think on a grander scale, the corporation is trying to figure out how to manipulate it. And because this mineral is in abundance on Fear Street, they're able to loop this over and over again, this town. But the thing is, things that happen still happen within that specific loop, based on the corporation's choosing. So all the new kids that you see coming in, i.e. when you saw Chuck come in on the fire game, that was done by the corporation. These are different things that the corporation throws in to see what will happen.
Right, and by being able to loop, they can actually experiment a lot more. One thing that we've been thinking about during these mythos sessions is there a Shadyside B site? There's a lot of evidence pointing towards Shadyside being somewhere in Ohio, and we've been calling that Shadyside A. But there's also, especially in the vacation novels, a lot of indications that Shadyside might be somewhere in Massachusetts or the Northeast. And we've been calling it Shadyside B.
I think those are apt names, except instead of the corporation having multiple sites of Shadyside, I propose a looping multiverse. We'll call it the Schwab hypothesis.
Schwab theory? We actually came up with this simply because we just reviewed V.E. Schwab's book, Darker Shade of Magic. Suddenly, it makes sense. What if it's not two different Shadysides? It's the same Shadyside that's part of a multi-dimensional universe that also includes a time loop. What better way for the corporation to gain power by exploiting the clay mineral than to try to build a gateway between the different universes? Now it can exploit the resources in many different dimensions and actually acquire even more power.
I theorize that the Fear family, for some reason, Simon Fear, in every single dimension, in every single alternate universe, is drawn to that mystery mineral, that clay deposit, the minerals, whatever the corporation is looking for now. Everywhere he goes, there will be a Shadyside. A Fear Street will spring up where he goes, it'll be a Shadyside. And that place in every single alternate universe is the same in every single one.
Much like the Londons were the same in every single of the universes that Schwab describes in her book.
A corporation has found that property in Shadyside. Not only do they want the ability of the mineral of the time loop that they are trying to control, they're also trying to get into every single different universe with various degrees of success. For instance, in Fear Street Goodnight Kiss, we saw the vampire world.
Yeah, in that particular dimension, vampires have kind of taken over. The presence of the corporation is not really as felt. Maybe the corporation will try to take over that Shadyside, but they're really going to be up against a formidable force in the vampires.
So I think in that universe, they're probably trying to keep their best to keep that Shadyside protected so the vampires don't come, so they aren't able to slide into the other universe that they're supposedly based in.
Yeah, there's a lot of different possibilities. I mean, this completely blows our mythos wide open to many, many possibilities. And I think going back to the Groundhog Day reference, I think it's absolutely amazing that R.L. Stine puts this huge fourth wall busting hint right at the end of the book for anybody that had any doubts about whether or not we are in fact in a time loop. He kind of just lays it all out there for anyone to see that's been paying attention.
What I do think is interesting is how the corporation has figured out how to manipulate time specifically, because in Stargate, they didn't have the control. It was just a bubble of Stargates that connected Earth to the planet. They were all stuck in that loop, that they couldn't control the specific hours. Here, it's obvious that the corporation has full control of the time loop, because you have characters. The next book we'll be reading is Silent Night 2. We know that Reva Dalby is going off to college, and that she has to have come back from college. I know there's a Silent Night 3 as well. So clearly, people who have come back are still brought into this original Shadyside. The corporation is able to either go to a specific time for the people who are coming back, or they're able to manipulate the loops enough that when the person is coming back, they are coming back to a time that is accurate to their point of view, even though they have left Shadyside. But this also explains why in Halloween Party, all the people who caused that one accident are still living in the same town with their kids growing up in the same place. These people weren't able to escape the loop. It's still sort of happening, but over time, the corporation does open up the loop a little bit, allowing some time to pass before they close it again, and they change the time frame little by little. So we're just seeing like a specific loop happening in this frame of time. Eventually, R.L. Stine will shift it, so we will see the disappearance of some of these characters.
I'm thinking it could be possible that maybe the corporation actually doesn't really control the time loops whatsoever. Going back to our theory of the three competing forces of Fear Street, the natural forces, the Fear family, and the corporation. What if the natural forces that have evolved over thousands of years are the ones that are actually keeping control of the time loop? Maybe the corporation's trying to wrest control from them, and there's a battle being waged underneath that we don't fully understand here.
That's very interesting. I think that is distinctly possible as well. Maybe the existence of the corporation isn't as sinister as we once believed. Maybe although they are trying to harness the power of the mineral, of the clay deposits there, of this supernatural force that exists, at the end of the day, they're also trying to rescue this town. It's sort of like R.L. Stine also referenced the musical Brigadoon.
Right, yeah, I keep going to the Groundhog Day references, but R.L. Stine left plenty of hints as to what's actually going on here. Brigadoon is, for those of you who are not aware, a musical about this mysterious Scottish town that is not on any map, and every 100 years it appears, and people can cross over into this parallel dimension where Brigadoon exists. And in the story, basically some people stumble upon it, there's a love story, somebody actually falls and breaks their head open and dies, which is somewhat similar to what's happening in this book. The whole idea of a town caught in a space-time dimensional warp is right there. R.L. Stine lays it out for you, and, Erica becomes very strangely attached to this.
You might be wondering why we're making such a big deal of Corey and David. I know that Serge had brought it up that they shouldn't be in this book, but you have to remember, this book encompasses 2 separate years. Even if you want to believe that the first year in this book is their senior year, like we've gone back a little bit, they still shouldn't be here that second year that this book takes place.
It doesn't add up, and if you think about it, there's been no mention of Lisa, so maybe in this loop, Corey hasn't even met Lisa yet.
Well, maybe in this loop, instead of the new girl, we had the new boy.
That could be the tweak that happened, the difference between the two. So, yeah, I'm actually really excited to see what comes next. The possibilities are essentially limitless at this point, but I still am really excited to learn more about the corporation, more about the 3 separate forces that are vying for control of the clay mineral.
We've had a lot about the natural resources and about the corporation that we could find in this. I do know that after the next book, we are dealing with the Fear Street saga, and that will give us a lot more insight on the Fear family, help us add a lot more to the mythos from that point of view, because I feel like we haven't had enough of the Fear family influence and their battle for the control of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the key to the entire mythos. Something that's called the Fear Street Saga. Saga being like the Icelandic word for like a myth or legend. I think obviously I have very high hopes for a series of Fear Street books titled something something saga.
Now, before you call the people with the butterfly nets for us, let's just move on from the mythos.
No, this is all really serious stuff, but why don't we just do callbacks as long as we're talking about
David Metcalf and Corey Brooks?
That's right. Yeah, that's the big major callback to previous Fear Street books, going all the way back to the original one.
Yeah, they show up at both ice skating rinks, the indoor and the outdoor one, on both Valentine's days. I can't think of any other callbacks.
90s things. The core concept of the threatening Valentine's Day cards. I feel like nowadays kids would just bully each other online instead of sending actual written notes. They would just get like Snapchats or something. Cyberbullying is a big thing nowadays, and that probably would have figured more prominently if this story were to be written today. Another thing is regarding Dave was initially suspected of Josie's murder. There could have been other evidence that might have placed him at the scene of the crime. For example, he didn't have an alibi, but if you pulled his cell phone records, you could take a look at the tower pings to figure out his location at the time of the murder. That could have absolved him of that crime and removed all suspicion from him.
Now, instead of having the intercom system all through their house, they would have had those cameras that you can just check your cell phone. I know that my parents actually have that in their house. It's just a security system that they can check on their phone. A lot of people have those Ring, well, I guess it's now Amazon Ring systems throughout their house. That would be something that actually would have helped the McLean family a lot more because they would be able to keep track of Rachel a lot easier. If that system had been in their house, then Erica's whole stab myself frame Dave would have been a lot harder to do. And also in terms of the internet, obviously Erica would have been on the internet a lot more. They called it her prison to be in the house. It would have still been a prison in some ways, but at least she would have been able to, I guess, be out on the web, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. Anyway, so those are definitely things that would be different if the book happened today. Nitpicks?
Well, I know you have a nitpick in terms of the first murder.
Josie is killed with the blade of a skate to the back, and that's described as being the cause of death. That simple description, it sounds like she's stabbed once with the skate, and it's like actually found sticking out of her back when they find her body. My question is, how deep do you need to stab someone in the back in order to kill? There's a bunch of ribs there that protect the vital organs, and if you're only stabbing once, I'm pretty sure the worst you can do is maybe puncture one lung, and that's if you can get like a nice deep stab wound and you manage to miss all the ribs. How deep could that skate really go? I mean, like, maybe 1 inch in? Does that even puncture the lung? The blade is usually pretty thick, so it might even get caught between two ribs and not even do anything. Personally, if I was going to kill somebody with a skate, I'd probably go for either the neck, the throat, or the head. Those seem like much more vulnerable areas than trying to stab somebody in the back with what is essentially a blunt object.
The pictures I saw on the internet, and from what I saw in the Winter Olympics, it doesn't really look like the blade protrudes much from the skate itself.
I think on the speed skates, it does protrude a little bit more.
Those are very specific skates, and I don't think many people in Shadyside would have speed skates, so I'm just assuming they're like generic.
Yeah, and most of those doesn't protrude hardly at all. I mean, I know I have hockey skates, and those the blade doesn't protrude.
I've never murdered anyone with ice skates, so bear with me as I try to walk through this. The quickest way to blood loss would have to be either the jugular or maybe even the femoral artery if you're not going to go for the core.
So that's definitely a nitpick for me. Aside from that...
Well, I guess you could actually, if you could angle it up, you could go like obliquely up from the bottom, so you're avoiding the ribs and up to the lungs. But I don't think a skate blade is long enough to do that.
No, I think the most you'd get in is 1 inch, like I mentioned earlier.
No one really wants to hear me go through the human body anatomically, so let's just move on. I can't really think of any nitpicks, so let's just go into what we thought of the book.
I actually like this book. I think I do tend to like the Super Chillers more than the regular books, on average. There have been some pretty good regular books, but being allowed to develop the characters a little more does make for a slightly better book.
I don't know if he really developed the characters a little more, to be honest. It was one of those things, for the longest time, I didn't know it was Erica. I think he did a really good job making me think it just might be Rachel.
Yeah.
When you realize, like, they say definitively, it's not Rachel. Okay, it's not Rachel. And then when you're at the ice skating rink, you really start thinking that it's Luke.
Yeah.
You could make a case for Luke for sure. And you could also make a case for Rachel, the Fear Street influence that I was thinking, like, oh, maybe it's one of those, like, supernatural books.
Or maybe she's, like, just blacking in and out of, like, an alternate personality, basically. I mean, that's possible. Somebody with, like, a huge head injury like that, who knows what's going on in there?
Well, that's a very Hollywood way of looking at it, but you are thinking more like the Phineas Gage type thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a in and out type thing. I mean, the human brain is very complex. I do think that the Jankman thing, we left out a lot of Jankman's appearances in the book because it was, like, obviously not him, especially with his lack of development.
So Jankman was, like, a real jerk. He was kind of seen as antisocial a lot, so you thought, like, oh, okay, he'd be capable of writing, like, a stupid card like this, but then like, everything else pointed towards it not being him.
How I read the book is I read the book and then I do an outline for the book. So when I was doing my second pass through the book, already knowing it was Erica, all the hints that he threw in that it was Erica, like, really made me go, oh, okay, it makes sense. He was putting it all in there.
Yeah.
And he did a really good job of that.
Definitely on a second go through the story, you could definitely tell in the scene where Josie is interrupted in the middle of the night by the intercom, and it's supposedly Rachel calling for help, but every time she goes to Rachel's room, Rachel's asleep. Okay, that's clearly, now knowing how the story ends, yes, it's Erica messing with her.
But the fact that they live on Fear Street, you do kind of think, is this going to go supernatural at any point?
Yeah, there's always that tantalizing possibility because you see, like, mysterious crackling on the intercoms. It keeps happening, and several characters note that, oh, it, sounds like it's haunted in here. It does keep you guessing, for sure.
I did think that the friend group was kind of like an incestuous friend group. I guess Melissa first ends up dating one of Josie's exes, and then she ends up dating Rachel's ex.
Right, and then you have Erica who wants to date Josie's other ex.
Jankman. But then her other ex, Steve, ends up calling her for a date out of nowhere. We know there are other guys and other people in Shadyside.
These girls all grew up together and were pretty close growing up, so maybe there's just like this weird bubble that they have. I don't know.
I do like how he portrayed Luke trying to move on from Rachel. I thought that was actually really realistic. The idea that at first he was really struggling to give Rachel up, that he was like latching onto her because he thought that maybe she would just go back to being the Rachel that he knew. And his letting go and the guilt he felt from it and going back to giving her a card, that felt very realistic. That was actually one of the more realistic things that I've seen in terms of coping.
It was touching. Good on R.L. Stine for tackling this issue. It's a very uncomfortable topic for a lot of people to think about. Probably part of what makes it such a good Fear Street storyline, because this is definitely something that people are afraid of. Losing your mental faculties, losing yourself, basically, is a scary concept. And I think he did a very realistic portrayal of teenagers trying to deal with it in their own ways.
We give R.L. Stine a lot of crap for how he writes characters and how he writes teenagers, but this was an instant that I thought he did a really, really good job. And he actually did a good job with Josie as well. As you're reading the book, you do think she's like a very, very cruel character with how she deals with Erica and Rachel. She comes off sort of like Reva Dalby. You do think about like Reva Dalby in the background, how she is just like unnecessarily cruel. There's really no reason for her to be such an awful human being. With Josie, you sort of get the same vibe, but then you find out what her reasoning is, and you can't really fault her for that reasoning. As badly as you feel for Erica being thrust in the situation that she's put into, you do also feel bad for Josie. It's very realistic, I thought.
And who's to say that you wouldn't react the same way if faced with the same situation? She takes the easy way out. It's very easy to blame her and say that she's awful, but I have no idea. If I was in the same situation, maybe I would also run away from my responsibilities because I wouldn't want to confront all the emotions of guilt that she's feeling. I really have to give him mad props for that portrayal. And on that note, how many silver letter openers out of 5 would you give this book?
I would actually give it 4 out of 5 on my Fear Street scale. Like I said, he portrayed people acting like people. Some of it is still a little unrealistic. For instance, I don't think, regardless of how quote-unquote expert these girls called themselves, that an actual good stable would let these random teenage girls just ride a bunch of horses out.
Oh yeah, that kid is definitely fired.
Especially with how litigious our society is, I don't think it's very believable. But then again, it might be a 90s thing. That, I guess, is sort of like a nitpick / 90s thing that kind of took me out of the book for a little bit, but I do have to say how he wrote them with the situation they were in, I found pretty believable. How about you?
I think I would give this book 2 bloody silver letter openers out of 5. Ordinarily, I might have been inclined to give this 2.5 out of 5. But I recently read another book that was also in the same genre of teen fiction, horror. And I think it did a more interesting portrayal of a kid with mental illness and the consequences of that. And I gave that book a 3 out of 5. And I think this one was a little bit worse. I actually gave that book 2.5 out of 5 to round up to 3. And I feel like this book is a little bit worse than that one for me personally. So I'm going to knock half a knife off and give it 2 out of 5. I think there are better Fear Street books out there if you want to get into the series. So this one doesn't merit as like a good intro for somebody who hasn't tried this series before. It's definitely an important book if you've already read a lot of them and you want to get a wider understanding of the Fear Street world. And especially if you want to figure out for yourself what the mythos is really all about. Definitely this is an important book. Looking forward to the next super chiller on our list.
Fear Street Super Chiller, Silent Night 2. Jingle bells, Santa kills. So on the front cover, you've got Reva Dalby, obviously. She is being grabbed by Santa Claus. He's covering her mouth. She looks surprised. He's looking at her sinisterly.
Whatever happens to her, we're pretty sure she has it coming.
Yeah, but there's a Silent Night 3, so she's not gonna die. But obviously, someone is out to get Riva Dalby because she is Riva Dalby, and all her Riva Dalbiness has probably like rubbed someone the wrong way.
Riva is like the most notoriously horrible, evil person in this entire series.
You know, we had talked previously about how, like, if you're poor, you're, like, to be feared and you're probably gonna die. If you're rich and a crappy person, chances are you're gonna die. Riva Dalby is the character that does not apply to. She is a horrible human being, and she will live, and she will continue living because she is Riva Dalby. I bet someone's after Riva Dalby. Something's happening. She's back in Shadyside. Her Riva Dalbiness, someone is out to get her. I think it's gonna be a guy because she seems to be particularly cruel to guys. Someone's gonna get hurt along the way. Probably someone that the killer might accidentally hurt because they think they're hurting Riva. So it's probably going to be a female. And well, the first Silent Night book, it was gun. Someone was shot. So for the second one, let's go for another generic one. Let's say someone's going to get stabbed.
I'm thinking kind of along the same lines as you. Probably it's Christmas season and she's messing around with getting kids jobs at her dad's store, pissing kids off. Same as the last book. I am thinking for murder or gender, I'm thinking female. There's going to be some guy creeping after her trying to get revenge. I think she's going to kill him. I think she's going to be the murderer and murder victim will be male. Cause of death, gonna get hit by a car. She's gonna run someone over. Predictions set.
I guess we'll stay silent about our predictions until the next book review.
Let's do this. Thank you for listening to another episode of Red Read Podcast.
We know this episode is going to be pretty long, so we really appreciate you guys, sticking with us and just enjoying the mythos section.
Yeah, let us know if you have any ideas or feedback. We've definitely incorporated other people's ideas into the mythos in the past, and we look forward to hearing what you guys think.
Thanks.
Bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Red Read Podcast.
Join us again as we continue our journey down Fear Street.
We love hearing from you guys, so feel free to reach out to us at Red Read Podcast on Twitter and Facebook.
Email us at red.read.podcast@gmail.com.
Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe.
Once again, thanks for listening. See you again soon.